Recording. Okay. Good morning. Welcome to PLC IV. It is April 22nd. This class and then the next week class, I think, are the last classes we have scheduled, and we will be meeting via Zoom next week too. So anything that we watch or do next week, I'll try to get the videos out a little bit earlier so you can kind of watch through them. But we'll actually be meeting face-to-face next week as well. So welcome to all of you all today. For some reason, my computer's taskbar is not cooperating with me, so I may be a little clumsy in how I have to do things here. But let me see if I can share a screen with you real quick. Okay, so what's going to happen today is theoretically what you did in our off week is you checked in on all of these videos here about standards-based grading. And if you didn't, that's fine. Maybe your group members can fill you in. There are 3 questions that I want us to really consider in some small groups today, measured around this hot take, which is the grades in most schools are a measure of behavior, not of learning. We talked a little bit about that last week as well. My take on this is that maybe standards-based grading could get us out of that, realm of behavior-based grading. But I might be wrong about that. There may be some flaws in standards-based grading too. So I kind of want you to have some conversations in and amongst yourselves today about the standards-based grading, about how you feel about it in as much as you know, about how you think that you might implement it in your classroom setting. And the other thing is that theoretically you are designing an integrated unit right now. I'm not, I don't teach that class, so I can't speak to how that's actually occurring over the distances and over the miles during this time. But think about that too, as far as standards-based grading. Would standards-based grading work for the unit that you're designing, or would it not? You know, I want you guys to kind of have some conversations about that as well. And so in the end, what we'll do is we'll come back and we'll try to voice all that stuff together. And any other thoughts that we might have about standards-based grading, and I'll try to tell you a little bit about how next week will go as well. So, questions about that? All right, I'm about to put you into smaller groups with each other. One other thing to talk about in your small groups, I'm about at the end of my Netflix queue. So I want you guys in your small groups, before you talk about anything else, talk about the most important thing. What are you watching on Netflix, so that when we report out at the end, you can tell me what my next show is to watch. I started Community. I kind of like Community, but I don't have anything else in the queue. So what's next on that? So all those conversations you can have with each other. Remember where to kind of find the info. I'm going to share the screen with you one more time. So as you get into your small groups in our modules, under equitable grading, the videos and such are in standards-based grading. The other thing that I want you to do, we did this last time we checked in too, in your smaller groups, just do a quick check-in. And you can kind of see that here. It says, so pick one person in your group, a lucky person. You can do it rock, paper, scissors, however you want. That person is going to list the names first and last of all the group members. And then you guys are going to do some addressing of these questions. And at the end, when I call you all back in, just the person who's designated to do that, just do a quick, just a few sentence wrap up of what you talked about. And that's how I'll know that you were here. So, questions about any of that? All right. Let me see if I can actually, let me wish that I could actually get this taskbar to work. That would be the first thing. So let's talk what you kind of talked about in your groups. First thing, let me look at my questions again. The last few weeks, we've talked about how grades in most schools are a measure of behavior and not of learning. And so my question is, did your group think that maybe standards-based grading would be a way to get beyond that? Or is it too complicated to put into practice? Are there issues with it that would surround the idea of implementing in your classroom? I just asked all those questions at once. So what did you talk about in your groups in terms of standards-based grading? First of all, did you think that maybe it was a way around behavior-based grading? And if so, why would you say that?
Okay, so I personally don't like it. I went to a school that used it,
Uh-huh.
and it's like, I think it's really good in theory, but sometimes how people execute it is not great.
Yeah.
So, like, the video talked about how you can eliminate some homework, and my school just eliminated homework completely.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so then nobody was accountable for doing work outside of class, even though it was like given to us. We didn't
Hmm.
have to do it because it wasn't for a grade. And then like you'd have your 2.0, 3.0, 4.0 standards on a test, and say you get all the 3 and 4.0s, but you don't get 80% of the 2.0, then you get a 1.5 in the test and you get a D, and then you have to go through the process of retaking it.
Yeah.
And it's just like a lot of work, and students get to the point where they're just like, whatever, it's passing,
Yep.
not gonna do it because, yeah.
It is. It's a wonderful thing in theory, and sometimes when we roll it out and put it into practice, it's pretty clunky. It's pretty clunky. That is 100% true. I agree with that very much. Other takes on that? Anybody else experience standards-based grading in a school? Um, when I proposed the idea of standards-based grading in the school where I was an administrator, that was one of the biggest pushbacks that we got. And ultimately, I listened to the teachers, and we didn't do it because of that. Is how for all those reasons you said, I don't. They were perfectly thrown out there. So that's one of the reasons that the school that I worked at didn't, even though I kind of pushed for it. Is it sounds great in theory, but what's the actual practice? And if you do that, if you roll it out and it's flawed in its concept, then it's going to be really hard to get public support of that. And the other thing we found from that, I guess I'll throw this out there, is that both students and parents, especially in a high school setting, which is where I worked, middle school and high school, they really like those traditional A, B, C, D, F grades. That's what they grew up with. There's a lot of concern among parents, especially of college-bound students, that if we standards-based grade, then how are we going to get the ABCD thing that the colleges look for, which is true. I mean, when Northwest, looks at your transcripts and things, they look for a GPA and all that sort of thing. How is it that the GPA translates? So if you're in a school that's trying to implement this, those are all questions and concerns that are valid. They're absolutely 100% valid, that need to be addressed before that gets laid out. Um, Other thoughts on that particular question? So we've answered kind of two of those. How might standards-based grading mitigate that hot take? How might it be a problem? Last one would be, how do you guys see it playing out in your classroom? I'm going to guess Reba doesn't see it playing out in her classroom at all. Um, can any of you make a case for it? Maybe not even in the framework of a district-wide thing or a school-wide thing. Is there a time in your classroom as an individual teacher where you would be more concerned about a student hitting a standard as opposed to giving a grade? Could that be a thing?
I'm doing high school, but I think it would be more like right now Eugene Field does it.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh, I think for elementary schools, it probably is a better choice.
I I actually probably agree with that. If you're going to implement it anywhere, an elementary school is probably the place to do it. And some districts do it at the elementary, and they hope that it kind of trickles up. Does that make sense? Like, because parents will get used to the standards-based thing, the theory then is that as they move up, schools that they then progress to will do standards-based. I don't know how that's worked out, quite honestly.
Right. Well, I have children and I see their progression through it.
Mhm.
And teachers are still, like, during parent teacher meetings, teachers are still able to explain to us what that means. So
Yeah,
I think it works out for the most part.
yeah. And I would agree with that. My kids go to Horace Mann, and Horace Mann also does standards-based grading. And to have a conversation with a teacher around the standards is a very valuable thing. And I think that's the thing that standards-based grading brings to the table more so than traditional grading. And that is,
Sorry, my wife's throwing candy at me.
that's okay, hey man. Anything you got to do to get through it.
Okay, I'm done. I'm sorry.
Uh, It's recording, so we're good. You were like 0 for 4. I'm sorry. What was I even saying? Standards-based. So the value comes in the conversation. The value comes in the conversation around the standards themselves. So if you as an educator can have a conversation with parents and students around the standards, then how are you graded is, I think, irrelevant. It's the conversations that come around the standards. And so one reason I am a fan of the idea of standards-based grading is because of those conversations and the feedback that you can give to students about whether they've hit the standards or whether they have more to work on. And if that's in there in some way, shape, or form, if I'm your administrator, whether you do it ABD, whatever, the conversations would be more what I would be. Okay. Let's talk a little bit about what next week's going to look like. Let me share my screen with you real quick. Okay, first of all, in your groups, please don't forget to do the check-in, just who was here and the general conversation that you had around what it was like. One or two sentences is enough for me. It's just a check-in to see who was here. So next week, April 29th, will be our last class meeting, I think. I don't think there's a finals week, but there's not a final for the PLC class. So next week will be our last meeting. What we're going to base it around is the idea of project-based learning. We started PBL stuff before all this, the COVID madness happened. And so essentially it's going to be kind of a wrap up of that. I'll have a couple of videos that I'll put up there throughout the course of this week. Go ahead and watch those if you're able to, and then we'll have conversations around those videos when we come back next week and try to do a general wrap up of the idea of equitable grading and specifically how it relates to you, and then hopefully how it relates to what you've done in the integrated curriculum class. So that's the general plan for next week. And as I said, hopefully by, what's today? Today's Wednesday. Hopefully by the end of this week, I'll have those videos and possibly a document or two for you to just peruse. Nothing real long. I know you're on the hook for other things. So any final thoughts or questions before we head out? Okay, I am appreciative of you, Spencer. Good luck catching the candy. At least make it like chocolatey or some sort. It sounded hard, so you be careful. Don't let her throw hard stuff at you. So if you don't have any further questions, you guys are free to head out. I'll stop the recording, but I'll hang out until you guys are all done, and I'll see you next week. Take care.